Before the British Empire carved mandates from fallen empires, before oil redrew the politics of the Middle East, and long before Iraq became a nation, there was Gertrude Bell. Born into a life of privilege, Gertrude was expected to follow the path of refinement and ease. But from the start, she refused to be confined by society's expectations. In a world that prepared women for the drawing room, she chose the path of languages and mountaintops. By the age of 17, she was already reading Arabic, Persian, and Turkish. At 20, she became one of the first women to graduate from Oxford with first-class honors in history, a remarkable achievement in a time when women weren't even granted degrees. But Gertrude's ambitions reached far beyond academia. She scaled the Alps in long skirts, nearly lost her life in a blizzard on the Finsteraarhorn, and relentlessly pursued solitude, danger, and the unknown. And then she discovered the desert. In Arabia, everything changed. Among the Bedouin tribes and ancient ruins, Gertrude was no mere visitor. She was a witness, a student, and ultimately a shaper of history. She traveled thousands of miles through uncharted lands, negotiated with tribal sheikhs, and earned the respected title Al-Khatun, the Lady. However, it wasn't just her archaeological expertise that made her one of the most influential women of the 20th century. It was how she applied her knowledge. While diplomats drew borders in Paris, it was Gertrude, based in Baghdad, who truly understood the Arab world. Trusted by kings, fluent in its languages, and attuned to its history, she became indispensable to Britain's post-war Middle East strategy. Together with T.E. Lawrence, famously known as Lawrence of Arabia, she played a key role in the rise of King Faisal I and helped shape the future of Iraq, drafting constitutions, advising governments, and even designing the national flag. Her authority was exceptional, her influence remarkable. Arab leaders sought her counsel, while British officials resented her power. And through it all, she remained, unofficially but undeniably, the uncrowned Queen of Mesopotamia. Join us as we explore the extraordinary life of Gertrude Bell, a woman born into Victorian society, yet destined to defy its constraints. A woman who refused to be a spectator as history unfolded, and instead became one of its primary authors. A woman whose courage led her deep into the desert, across unforgiving landscapes and complex political terrain, in pursuit of something greater than herself. Along the way, she would experience love, loss, and leave a legacy that would resonate through the sands of time. Brilliance and industry coursed through the veins of Gertrude Bell's family tree, a legacy epitomized by her grandfather, Sir Isaac Lothian Bell. Born in 1816, Lothian immersed himself in the study of metallurgy across Europe, returning to revolutionize England's blast furnaces and establish the nation's inaugural aluminum plant. In 1844, he co-founded Bell Brothers, a company that would become a dominant force in the northeast of England, employing a staggering 47,000 workers and producing a third of Britain's iron by the 1870s. Yet, Lothian was not merely an industrial titan, he was a scientific luminary, a Fellow of the Royal Society, and a recipient of the prestigious Bessemer Gold Medal. His metallurgical treatises and leadership in major scientific societies solidified his reputation as a pioneering mind. Politically active, he served as Newcastle's mayor, Durham's sheriff, and a member of Parliament, his global travels and accomplishments cementing his status as Britain's greatest ironmaster. In 1842, Lothian Bell wed Margaret Pattinson, the daughter of a chemical manufacturer. The couple built a grand Gothic mansion in the village of Washington and raised 5 children, among them Thomas Hugh Bell, Gertrude's father. Hugh received a diverse education, studying chemistry and mathematics in Edinburgh, Paris, and Germany before joining the family business at Bell Brothers. He swiftly ascended the ranks, managing the Middlesbrough branch and later overseeing the entire enterprise. Fluent in English, French, and German, Hugh was renowned for his wit, intellect, and political candor, championing free trade while opposing Irish home rule. Adventure coursed through his veins. He was passionate about hunting and climbing, embracing the belief that obstacles existed to be conquered. After years of bachelorhood, he married Mary Shield in 1867, the soft-spoken daughter of a wealthy Newcastle merchant. They wed quietly in Scotland, and by Christmas, Mary was expecting their first child. On July 14, 1868, Gertrude Margaret Lothian Bell entered the world, her birth announced in the esteemed pages of the Times, a testament to her family's social prominence. She was a striking child, inheriting her mother's beauty and her father's sharp features, with reddish hair, piercing blue-green eyes, and a commanding presence that would only grow with time. Raised under the strict tutelage of her nanny, Miss Olgay, Gertrude was imbued with the Victorian ideals of decorum, discipline, and imperial duty. The Bell family's worldview was shaped by the Empire, their wealth built upon industry and an unwavering belief in Britain's civilizing mission. Men were seen as the architects of the empire. Women were expected to serve as the guardians of morality and cultural refinement. Gertrude's early education reflected this gendered vision. While her brother was destined for Eton, she was privately tutored in languages, literature, music, sports, and the domestic arts, preparing her for a life of marriage and social hosting. When Gertrude was 2, the family relocated to Red Barns, a grand estate in Redcar, where she was raised amidst nature and freedom. She rode horses, climbed trees, and watched steamships sail towards distant lands, her imagination ignited by the promise of adventure. The estate was a child's paradise, featuring a racket court, a pond, a bike house, and beloved gardens that nurtured Gertrude's curiosity and spirit. She roamed freely indoors, sharing a profound emotional bond with her mother, Mary. That cherished bond was shattered in 1871 when Mary Bell succumbed to pneumonia after giving birth to Gertrude's brother, Maurice. Gertrude, not yet 3, was devastated by the loss. She responded with imaginative grief, holding mock funerals and ceremonies for deceased animals as she grappled with the incomprehensible absence of her mother. In the wake of Mary's death, Hugh Bell became Gertrude's central emotional anchor, their relationship uniquely close. They spent countless hours gardening, riding, and tending to animals, finding solace in each other's company. For 8 years following the passing of his wife, Hugh Bell resisted the pressure to remarry, devoting himself wholeheartedly to his children. That changed in 1874 when he met Florence Olive, a poised, intellectual playwright with elite Franco-English connections. Florence began winning Gertrude over through heartfelt letters and thoughtful gestures. When Hugh proposed to Florence in 1876 after the performance of her opera, Gertrude and Maurice were not invited to the wedding, a common practice for the time, but nonetheless painful for the young children. Despite being excluded, Gertrude responded with grace during the honeymoon, addressing Florence as "my dear mother." Yet she clung emotionally to her father, writing to him frequently with a mixture of anxiety and longing. While Florence introduced Gertrude to the enchanting worlds of literature and theater, regaling her with tales like Alice in Wonderland and the Arabian Nights, their relationship soon became strained. Florence's perfectionism and cool demeanor left the children feeling alienated, and the birth of 3 half-siblings, Elsa, Molly, and Hugo, deepened Gertrude's sense of displacement. Her rebellious energy clashed with Florence's strict standards, and she became increasingly difficult, driving away nannies and often being sent to stay with extended family. Books became Gertrude's escape, her refuge from the turmoil of her home life. Though Florence attempted to supervise her reading, Gertrude devoured serious texts from an early age, reading A History of the English People at 11, Browning's poetry at 14, and later, biographies of Mozart and Macaulay. Unlike most girls of her social class, Gertrude's mind yearned for more than the confines of domesticity and the frivolity of society balls. Recognizing her exceptional intellect, Hugh and Florence enrolled her at Queen's College London, one of the few institutions that welcomed female students at the time. Gertrude excelled academically, topping her class in history and thriving in French, grammar, and geography. Yet even the standard coursework failed to satiate her hunger for knowledge, and she demanded more challenging material, setting the stage for a life of unquenchable curiosity and trailblazing achievements. Socially, however, Gertrude struggled. She missed her family and felt lonely among her aspiring peers. In letters, she wrote of being horribly miserable and realized humblingly that she was not as brilliant as she had once assumed. Even London itself failed to comfort her. She longed for the North's fresh air and autumnal beauty. To manage her inner turmoil, Gertrude began writing compulsively, her letters rich with vivid detail, emotional insight, and sharp observation. By her late teens, Gertrude was resolved to pursue a life of the mind. Though society expected marriage, she began to dream of an academic path. With the encouragement of a Queen's College teacher, she made a bold request to her father to attend Oxford University. In a letter she joked, "My only fear is if I once go there, you will never be able to get me away." In 1886, Gertrude entered Oxford, a revolutionary step for a woman. She enrolled at Lady Margaret Hall, one of the university's first colleges for women. Oxford, however, remained deeply patriarchal. Its sermons taught female inferiority, and intellectuals like Herbert Spencer claimed education would damage women's reproductive health. Lady Margaret Hall's own principal, Elizabeth Wordsworth, emphasized modesty and domestic virtue over scholarship. But Gertrude rejected all such ideas. Encouraged by her father, she was determined to excel on equal footing with men. On her first day, dressed in cap and gown, she attended a lecture at Balliol College alongside her peers. They were placed conspicuously on a platform apart from the 200 male students, a symbol of their outsider status. Gender segregation persisted, with some professors even refusing to face the female students directly. But Gertrude remained unfazed, immersing herself in university life. Her days were filled with lectures, reading at the Radcliffe Library, and private tutorials. Gertrude built a small but meaningful circle of friendships. Mary Talbot became her intimate confidant. Edith Langridge and Janet Hogarth joined her inner circle. Yet she never fully won over Miss Wordsworth, who found her emotionally reserved. She found joy and comfort in her cousin Horace Marshall, then a student at Trinity. They were allowed discreet walks together, nurturing a cherished lifelong bond. Gertrude also experienced mild romantic flirtations, skating with Mr. Raper, tea with Mr. Cockerell, a spark with cousin Billy Lascelles, but none blossomed into lasting romance. By her second year, Gertrude had completed her coursework ahead of schedule and prepared for her final examinations, or schools. Her oral exams were a triumph, and Gertrude became the first woman at Oxford to earn a first in modern history. The Times published the news, and she received accolades for her independence and honesty of thought. Yet her brilliance intimidated potential suitors. By 20, she had no serious romantic prospects. In hopes of softening her formidable presence, Florence's sister Mary Lascelles invited her to Bucharest, where her husband was the British minister. Accompanied by her cousin Billy Lascelles, Gertrude left in late 1887. Though she parted from Hugh bravely, her letters from Romania expressed homesickness and unease. Still, the experience would prove formative. And in Bucharest, Gertrude entered elite diplomatic society. Under Aunt Mary's guidance, she learned continental etiquette, how to smoke, use a fan, and avoid social faux pas. Gertrude was exposed to major European figures, including King Carol I of Romania, Queen Elizabeth, who wrote literature under the pen name Carmen Silva, and future chancellors von Bülow and Goluchowski. Two friendships shaped her political awareness. Charles Harding, a rising diplomat who deepened her interest in Ottoman affairs, and Valentine Carroll, an educated journalist and covert intelligence figure who became a confidant. In spring 1889, Gertrude, Billy, and Valentine traveled to Constantinople. The city, still central to Britain's eastern interests, dazzled her. The Ottoman Empire, though in decline, was geopolitically vital, and the Eastern question, how to preserve Ottoman integrity against Russian ambitions, was a pressing British concern. Though not yet fully attuned to the politics, Gertrude was captivated by the city's sensory richness: glowing minarets, fluttering flags, Turkish coffee, and bustling bazaars. She explored palaces, mosques, and markets, enchanted by its grandeur and mystery. During their journey home aboard the Orient Express, Gertrude and Billy appeared on the verge of engagement. Her sister Elsa later described this period as the last chapter of absolute happiness. At 20, Gertrude seemed poised to fulfill both romantic and intellectual dreams. But reality intruded upon her return to London. Billy continued to court her, but she grew disillusioned, finding him shallow, emotionally unavailable, and intellectually dull. Her affection for him waned as she increasingly longed for her father, not her suitor. By autumn 1889, her romantic hopes had faded. Her official society debut in 1890, marked by court presentations and glittering events, left her unimpressed. She found most eligible men boring. Life at Red Barns offered little relief. Home felt stifling. Her days filled with reading, tutoring her siblings, and village charity. She regained some spark in London, fencing, attending salons, and exploring museums. But beneath her polished surface, melancholy took root. Seeking purpose and escape, she chose to travel. After spending a winter studying Persian, she joined her Aunt Mary for a journey to Iran. On May 7, 1892, Gertrude arrived in Tehran. She was instantly enchanted. Describing the British legation as a Garden of Eden, she marveled at the mirrored salons, rose gardens, and exotic beauty of Persia. Her imagination ignited again. Among Tehran's diplomatic set, one man captivated her: Henry Cadogan, a witty, red-haired British attaché. Within days, Gertrude called him the real treasure. His intelligence, charm, and elegance made him the centerpiece of her Persian experience, and the beginning of her most passionate and tragic love affair. In Tehran, Gertrude's world expanded both emotionally and intellectually. She became close with Friedrich and Nina Rosen, Arabists and diplomatic elites who nurtured her growing fascination with Arabic culture. But it was Henry Cadogan, a witty, cultured British diplomat, who captured her heart. Together, they rode through the Persian desert, sharing books and long conversations. Their romance was idyllic and poetic. They kissed in rose-scented gardens, visited the Shah's royal encampment, and recited verses from Catullus and Omar Khayyam. During a cholera outbreak, they sought solace in literature and nature, reading Browning, playing tennis, and riding into the mountains. Gertrude dreamed of a life with Cadogan in Damascus or Baghdad, much like her Aunt Mary's glamorous diplomatic path. Confident in their love, Cadogan formally asked Hugh Bell for Gertrude's hand. She eagerly wrote home to share the news, but as weeks passed with no reply, her anxiety grew. She suspected her father was investigating Cadogan's financial prospects. His findings were damning. Though well-born, he had no inheritance, unstable career prospects, and considerable gambling debts. In September 1892, Hugh refused the match. Devastated, Gertrude admitted she had underestimated how much she longed for love and security. Though convention required them to part, Gertrude fought to defend the relationship. She begged her parents to see his worth. Nothing I have done or thought has not had him in it. Yet heartbreak overwhelmed her. Returning to England that October, she confided in Valentine Carroll. She understood the match was impossible, but confessed she remained emotionally tethered to Cadogan. When Hugh visited, she spoke openly of her sorrow, but quietly vowed to wait for Cadogan. With Florence's encouragement, she began writing Persian pictures, drawing from her time in Iran. But in August 1893, tragedy struck. A telegram announced that Henry Cadogan had died of pneumonia while fishing near the River Lar. Whether accidental or a quiet surrender, his death crushed her. Cadogan's death robbed her not just of a partner, but of a future she had dared to imagine. At 25, she was suddenly and irrevocably alone. In the years that followed, Gertrude sought solace in motion, traveling throughout Europe, deepening her Persian studies, and continuing to write. But Cadogan remained an ever-present ghost, his memory flickering in art, literature, and every newlywed couple she saw. The profound love she experienced with him would remain unmatched for years to come. She channeled her grief into translating the Divan of Hafiz, a monumental project completed in 1896 and published in 1897. In it, Gertrude compared Hafiz to Dante and Goethe, earning critical acclaim. Scholar A. J. Arbery would later call it the finest English translation of Hafiz. Through Hafiz, she found a mirror for her sorrow and a spiritual refuge. Still drawn to the East, Gertrude began learning Arabic under Friedrich Rosen's guidance. She split her time between intense study and social gatherings with London elites. Despite praise for Persian pictures, societal expectations restricted her. She still needed escorts, and as an unmarried woman at 28, she remained marginal. Watching her friend Mary Talbot marry Reverend Winfred Burroughs only deepened her loneliness. An invitation to Berlin in 1897 offered brief purpose. She attended Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee celebrations and witnessed political tensions firsthand. During an embassy event, Kaiser Wilhelm II ominously warned of instability in the Balkans, a foreshadowing of Britain and Germany's imperial rivalry. But Berlin could not mask her grief. In March 1897, she endured two devastating losses. Her beloved Aunt Mary Lascelles died suddenly, followed soon after by Mary Talbot's death from childbirth. Needing distance, she left England for a world tour with Maurice. Together, they traveled through the United States, Japan, Hong Kong, and the Alps, where Gertrude discovered mountaineering. Physical challenge became emotional therapy, yet England still felt suffocating. She gave lectures on Persia, quietly turned 30, and resumed language study, but felt emotionally untethered. The Dreyfus affair stirred public debate, but Gertrude remained detached. In early 1899, she found new direction: archaeology. She traveled to Rome and Athens, where she observed a dig led by David Hogarth. Watching ancient ruins emerge from the earth stirred something powerful within her. She returned to England via Constantinople and Berlin, speaking with Kiril of her loneliness and her growing obsession with climbing. That summer, she attempted the Mage, a daunting Alpine peak. Though unsuccessful, the experience deepened her love for mountaineering. By November 1899, she had resolved to return to the East, not as a tourist, but as a serious scholar. Her new destination was Jerusalem, a city layered with faith, empire, and conflict. She departed via Athens and Smyrna, where Carroll had arranged British support. On the boat to Beirut, she observed 300 Russian pilgrims seeking spiritual redemption, something she didn't share. A lifelong atheist, Gertrude placed her faith in England, empire, and family. She took a room at the Hotel Jerusalem near the Rosens and transformed it into her study, filling it with maps, books, and photographs. She secured a horse, hired an Arabic tutor, and dedicated herself to learning the language. Her study routine was rigorous: 4 hours of lessons daily, plus nightly review. She explored Jerusalem's winding streets in straw hats and lace blouses, absorbing the tension between the modern suburbs and the ancient old city. She immersed herself in the city's landscape and culture. She wandered religious sites alone, from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to the Mount of Olives, photographing vistas with her Kodak camera. She admired the Dead Sea and Moab hills while observing the city's religious sectarianism. Jerusalem revived her emotionally. For the first time since Cadogan's death, she felt joy. Immersed in Arabic studies, she was thrilled to read Aladdin and the Arabian Nights without a dictionary. Her days were marked by coffee, pistachios, and long walks in brilliant Middle Eastern light. But joy gave way to anxiety when she learned Maurice had enlisted in the Boer War. Though tempted to return home, she stayed and clung to Arabic as a source of emotional strength. Around this time, inspired by Friedrich Rosen, she began planning her own desert expedition. She left Jerusalem on horseback, accompanied by a small team and eventually her trusted guide, Tarif. She crossed barren valleys, bathed in a canvas tub, and delighted in speaking Arabic. To continue her journey, she needed Ottoman permission. A Turkish officer visited her camp, and she won his favor with coffee, cigarettes, and charm. He granted her a Circassian escort. They traveled past Bedouin camps and storks to the Persian ruins of Meshetta. On the return, they encountered armed Beni Sakr tribesmen who withdrew after recognizing her soldier escort. She soon reached Petra, entering through the narrow Bab es-Sik to find the awe-inspiring rose-red temple and hundreds of tombs. Camping beneath mausoleums, she absorbed the majesty of the ancient city. Returning to Jerusalem, visibly sunburnt, she journeyed north through Palestine with the Rosens. Dressed in a keffiyeh and divided skirt for practicality, she was often mistaken for a man. Breaking off from the Rosens, she entered the forbidden Hauran Plain, home to the Druze, considered dangerous for Europeans, especially women. Gertrude went anyway. In Basra, she handled the suspicious Ottoman governor with polite resistance, and when she was denied travel clearance, she staged a daring midnight escape. In the Druze mountains, she was warmly received. In Miamir, a striking Druze man kissed her on arrival and became her guide. Farmers welcomed her, and in Are, she entertained locals with stories. She met Yahya Bey, a respected Druze leader, who granted her safe passage and an escort. Weeks later, he was still asking, "Have you seen a queen traveling?" On May 11, 1900, she reached Damascus. Reflecting on her solo travels, she felt little loneliness, only a wish to share it with her father. With his blessing, she planned a deeper trek into the desert. Hiring Kurdish soldiers, a cook, and a guide, she rode beyond Jared into blazing heat. Traveling by night, she slept under the stars and found the desert more intense than any mountain. Extreme heat and thirst pushed her to the brink. She dozed in the saddle, wore muslin to keep insects at bay, and joked she'd be the last to flee if attacked. Eventually, she reached Palmyra, the ancient Roman city where columns and the Temple of Baal rose from the sand. Continuing her travels, she encountered the Agile Arabs, loyal to Ibn Rashid. Welcomed with camel's milk and coffee, she felt a deep kinship. Dressed in khaki and keffiyehs, she belonged among them more than with British travelers. Next, she visited the Hassina tribe. Their young sheikh, Muhammad, hosted her with music, roast sheep, and coffee served by hand. She gifted him a pistol in thanks, later calling the meal worth the pistol. Before leaving, she gathered pine cones from Lebanon's cedar groves to plant at home. She returned to England in June 1900, but was already dreaming of going back, reflecting, "One doesn't keep away from the East when one has got into it this far." She spent the summer and much of 1901 in Yorkshire, tending to her father and visiting London, where she met often with Valentine Carroll, who used her reports for the Times and British policy briefings. Her love of the desert was matched only by her passion for mountaineering. In 1899, she had scaled the formidable Mage and in August 1900, she returned to Chamonix, eager to conquer more peaks. By the summer of 1901, she was back in the Alps. After training on the Mer de Glace, she triumphantly summited the Grépon and the Drew. Though weather cut her season short, Gertrude remained undeterred. In August, she tackled the treacherous Engelhorn range with her trusted guides, Ulrich and Heinrich Führer. On a perilous new route, she stood steadfast on Heinrich's shoulders, helping Ulrich ascend. Ulrich later confessed that a single misstep would have spelled doom for them all, but Gertrude concealed her fear beneath a veneer of humor. That year, she completed an astonishing 9 major ascents, 7 first ascents, 1 new ridge, and 2 established peaks. In recognition of her prowess, one peak was christened Gertrude's Peak, a testament to her growing reputation as one of the foremost female mountaineers of her generation. In early 1902, Gertrude set out for the east once more, traveling with her father and brother Hugo through Algiers and Naples before continuing alone to Malta and Smyrna. Returning to England in May 1902, she soon found herself drawn back to the Alps. That summer, a train conductor recognized her as the Miss Bell who had climbed the Engelhorn. Alongside the Führers, she tackled the Wellhorn Arete and attempted the treacherous Finsteraarhorn. The climb ended in a furious lightning storm, forcing them to endure a frigid overnight stay on the mountain. When Gertrude slipped, nearly pulling Heinrich to his death, Ulrich's swift intervention saved them. Her composure in the face of danger was remarkable. Ulrich later declared that no amateur climber, male or female, could match her bravery. Back in London, Gertrude resumed her society life and reconnected with Valentine Carroll. Together, they meticulously planned her trip to India for the 1903 Delhi Durbar, a grand celebration marking King Edward VII's accession to the throne. Traveling with her brother Hugo, Gertrude marveled at the pageantry of imperial parades and majestic elephants. Carroll introduced her to influential figures, including Percy Cox, the British resident in Muscat, who briefed her on the rising rivalry between Ibn Rashid and Ibn Saud, insights that would later shape her future political strategy. After the Durbar, Gertrude and Hugo embarked on a tour of East Asia and North America. They visited the vibrant cities of Singapore, Shanghai, Seoul, and Tokyo before crossing the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Gertrude found solace in climbing the Canadian Rockies and admired the serene beauty of Lake Louise, but found American cities like Chicago chaotic and grimy. After brief stops at Niagara Falls and Boston, they returned to England in July 1903. At home, Gertrude confronted the social pressures of spinsterhood. While her sister Molly fell in love, their father, Hugh, rejected the match. Gertrude intervened, introducing Molly to Charles Trevelyan, whom she married in 1904, a joyful event that nonetheless reminded Gertrude of her own romantic disappointments. During her trip to India, Lord Dartry had proposed, but she felt nothing for him. Despite her striking beauty, keen intellect, and growing fame, no man seemed to be her equal. By March 1904, Gertrude grew restless. Denied access to Ibn Rashid's domain, she remained in London, attending elite events and cultivating friendships, including with the renowned artist John Singer Sargent. In September, she prepared for a scholarly return to the East. She immersed herself in the study of archaeology with Salomon Reinach in Paris, absorbing knowledge of classical and Islamic art. Back in London, inspired by David Hogarth's The Penetration of Arabia, she planned a new expedition to Arabia's fringes, one that would combine archaeology, photography, and cultural inquiry. She left London on January 4, 1905, arriving in Beirut, armed with rifles, lace petticoats, concealing contraband, and military maps. She passed through Turkish customs with charm and reconnected with officials. Learning that Ibn Rashid was losing ground to the British-backed Ibn Saud only deepened her resolve. Though forbidden from entering Nejd, she remained determined to explore its borders. In Jerusalem, she meticulously prepared for her journey, acquiring animals, rehiring her trusted muleteer Muhammad the Druze, and meeting Sir Mark and Lady Sykes. Tensions emerged quickly. Sykes, a staunch Catholic imperialist, viewed Arabs with disdain. Gertrude, a secular scholar who respected Arab culture, soon clashed with him. Their relationship soured when he accused her of route theft and leaking information. In a vitriolic letter, he called her a bitch, man-woman, and windbag, marking the beginning of a bitter rivalry that would span years. On February 5, 1905, Gertrude departed Jerusalem for the desert, a storm marking her entry into Jordan. She crossed into Ottoman Syria, playing the dual roles of explorer and unofficial British agent. Her notes, ostensibly for her book, were also intelligence reports shared with Karol and the Foreign Office. She traveled without formal permits, attempting to strengthen ties with the Druze. Among the Druze, Gertrude was welcomed as an honorary man. She dined in men's tents, discussed raids, and watched a war ritual involving 2,000 armed men. On February 26th, she returned triumphantly to Damascus, weather-beaten and accompanied by Bedouin and mules. But her movements had triggered diplomatic alarm, and the Turkish government summoned her. She soon became a recognized force in Middle Eastern politics, admired, monitored, and no longer anonymous. In Damascus, she cultivated relationships with elite families like the Abdul Qadirs, and learned that French Orientalist René Dussault intended to reach Hayil. Determined to beat him there, she strengthened her connections. Damascus, with its blend of ancient tradition and modernity, enchanted her. Gertrude next traveled through Asia Minor, documenting Byzantine and Roman ruins. At Anavars, she braved snakes and mosquitoes. At Ben Bir Kilis, she copied inscriptions later validated by archaeologist William Ramsey. She eventually hired Fatu, a Christian Armenian from Aleppo, who would become her loyal travel companion for years. In Constantinople, she met with British diplomats to discuss Germany's growing influence in the Ottoman Empire, and Gertrude's insights into Ottoman dynamics proved increasingly valuable to policymakers. Returning to England in 1905, she began writing The Desert and the Sown, combining travel narrative, ethnography, archaeology, and political commentary. It was published in 1906 to great acclaim, its success cementing her position as an authority on the Arab world. At her family's estate, Rounton Grange, Gertrude balanced scholarship with her social life, hosting diplomats and supporting her family's ironworks. Rounton became an informal hub for global discussion, and Gertrude adopted a diplomatic principle from Sir Frank Swetnam. Listen to all sources, not just official ones. Still restless, Bell planned her next move. In 1907, she proposed and funded an archaeological expedition in Asia Minor with William Ramsey. Her goal? To solidify her academic credibility and one day gain access to Central Arabia. In Konya, while preparing logistics, she met Major Charles Richard Doughty Wiley, the blue-eyed vice-consul and nephew of famed explorer Charles Doughty. Gertrude and Richard soon developed a deep connection, and despite the fact that Richard's wife was kind to Gertrude, it soon became clear their bond was romantic in nature. They shared a passion for literature, the Middle East, and political affairs, and this connection would shape her emotional life for years to come. But despite her own great adventures and influence, Gertrude's views became increasingly conservative. In 1908, she joined the Women's Anti-Suffrage League. Influenced by figures like Queen Victoria, Curzon, and Mrs. Humphrey Ward, she believed political leadership was a male domain. She viewed suffragettes like the Pankhursts as disruptive and held that most women lacked the education and experience needed for governance, though she saw herself as an exception, not a representative of her sex. Her beliefs were shaped by her volunteer work among working-class women in Clarence. There, she witnessed firsthand the poverty and lack of education that, in her view, made broad female enfranchisement premature. Thus emerged one of her defining contradictions: a woman breaking boundaries abroad, yet upholding traditional roles at home. In 1909, she launched another expedition, this time across Syria and into Mesopotamia. Denied access to Nejd by Percy Cox due to tribal unrest, she focused on surveying ruins and mapping cultural landscapes between Aleppo and Baghdad. In Aleppo, Gertrude reunited with Fatus and assembled her caravan. Her greatest archaeological discovery came soon after, the fortress of Uqaydir. Contrary to its name, it was a massive 6th century palace with vaulted halls and circular towers. Gertrude meticulously photographed, sketched, and measured the site, calling it the greatest piece of luck that had ever happened to her. Despite illness, she persevered. At Babylon, she visited German excavations. At Seleucia and Ctesiphon, she documented ruins. And in Baghdad, she stayed at the British Residency, earning Colonel Ramsay's trust and access to intelligence, which she used to write for the Times, advocating for a railway from Basra to Baghdad. Her status in Baghdad soared. She was granted a rare audience with the Sunni Naqib and hosted the powerful Shamar Sheikh, Humaydi Beg ibn Farhan, who granted her access to Shamar lands. In the Kurdish mountains, she studied Christian ruins and orchards, but disaster struck when her belongings, including notebooks and photos, were stolen. Though recovered later, the episode humiliated her. Though marred by setbacks, the expedition had been a triumph, and she wrote that they had reaped a harvest that surpassed even her wildest imagination. Yet, in Constantinople, her joy turned to despair when she discovered that French scholar Louis Massignon had published on Uqaydir first, undermining her claim to discovery. The emotional blow of losing academic credit added a final sting to what had otherwise been a landmark journey. After her return to England, Gertrude spent 18 months writing Amurath to Amurath, based on her 1909 Mesopotamian journey. In January 1911, she returned to Uqaydir to confirm her measurements and reassert its architectural significance, though her excitement was dimmed by the emotional toll of years spent abroad. Her journey continued across sacred sites tied to Shiite, Assyrian, and Jewish history: Najaf, Kalat Shergat, Haran. By May 1, 1911, wearied and emotionally drained, she longed for the English spring and family life, acknowledging the cost of her isolation. Seeking human connection, she visited the British Museum dig at Carchemish, where she met David Hogarth's assistants, Campbell Thompson and a young T.E. Lawrence. Gertrude, in desert attire, made an impression and immediately recognized Lawrence's brilliance. He is going to make a traveler. At Carchemish in 1911, Gertrude bonded with Lawrence and Thompson. Though initially critical of their archaeological methods, she grew fond of their energy and intellect. Villagers mistakenly thought she was Lawrence's fiancée, and in coffee-fueled chats inside an old licorice warehouse, a historic partnership began. Lawrence later described her as brilliant, difficult, and admirable. By March 1911, she left Uqaydir, visiting Babylon's German-led excavation, then documenting Seleucia and Ctesiphon before staying at the British Residency in Baghdad. Throughout 1911 to 1912, Gertrude published her Uqaydir monograph, wrote for the Times, and monitored Ottoman decline. She corresponded closely with Doughty Wiley in Constantinople, their relationship deepening into a passionate, if unconsummated, emotional affair. He visited Rounton Grange, and their poetic letters revealed mutual yearning. But torn by guilt and loyalty to his wife, Richard withdrew. His letters turned cold, and their romance quietly ended in 1912, devastating Gertrude but prompting emotional maturity. In November 1913, she returned to Damascus to begin her long-awaited Arabian expedition. She arrived at the Palace Hotel with rifles, corsets, and survey maps. Customs officers waved her through, an acknowledgement of her growing reputation. She met with allies like Sheikh Mohammed Bassam and prepared her logistics with her trusted servant Fatu and a new guide, Muhammad Marawi. Her goal was to reach Hayil and meet Ibn Saud. Disguising her strategic aims under archaeology, she plotted a discreet route to avoid Ottoman detection. She secured supplies, bargained in souks, and finalized funding with her father. A symbolic bread and salt ritual sealed her financial dealings with Ibn Rashid's agent, whom she mistrusted. When Fatu fell ill with typhoid, she delayed departure but ultimately left without him. Confiding in Carol, she admitted to being haunted by Richard's absence. Then, unexpectedly, a letter from Richard arrived, 4 months late, filled with restrained passion and spiritual anguish. She couldn't sleep that night. At dawn, she departed Damascus. Her caravan, 20 camels, armed guards, and inadequate staff, soon faced logistical chaos. At Dumir, rain soaked her gear. Crossing black volcanic hills, she found peace and solitude. By day 5, she reached Jebel Sai, but danger lay ahead. Approaching Drew's land, she was ambushed by horsemen, one naked, who forced down her camel and seized supplies. Friendly sheikhs intervened and negotiated a bribe for the return of her goods. The experience shattered her sense of desert invulnerability. On Christmas Day, 1913, she worked at Burqa, then welcomed the new year at Qasr Azraq with coffee by firelight, imagining ghosts of Roman and Mamluk warriors. January brought dust, thirst, and hardship. At Ziza, Fatu returned, bringing delicacies and comfort, but also danger. Turkish soldiers arrived, furious she had neared the Hejaz railway. Her camp was searched, weapons confiscated, staff arrested. She was ordered to turn back. Instead, she planned a detour via Palmyra. Her emotional wounds reopened with more letters from Richard, in which he openly envisioned a life with her, only to declare it impossible, the emotional push and pull no help to her already troubled situation. In Ammon, she found brief peace, but both Ottoman and British authorities now refused responsibility for her safety. With help from Christian Arabs, she rebuilt her caravan. On January 18, 1914, she recorded its makeup and set out across Beni Sakr lands toward Nejd. She traversed dry plains, noted ruins, and sent detailed reports home. By night, she wrote tender, philosophical letters to Richard. She documented flora and inscriptions. Near Beir, she photographed Umayyad ruins. Entering Anaze territory, her men grew anxious. At a well, they found a bloodied corpse. Gertrude wondered if she would come out of the adventure alive. As the landscape turned harsh, flint plains, freezing winds, blazing sun, Gertrude pressed on. A single blooming geranium caught her eye, a symbol of survival. Soon, the feared raiding tribe, the Hawitat, neared. Knowing a clash was imminent, she rode directly to their camp. At the Hawitat camp, she diplomatically presented herself to Sheikh Harb. He welcomed her with bitter coffee, a peace ritual. That night, she changed into formal clothes and dined in honor, accepting the sheep's eye, a tribal sign of respect. Later, Ottoman-aligned Muhammad Abu Tayyi questioned her permit. She exited the tent while her men soothed tensions. In the end, Muhammad became her ally, gifting her lamb and ostrich skin and sharing fireside talks that deepened their bond. Together, they journeyed into Ruwala lands. Though Auda Abu Tayyi was absent, Gertrude entered the women's tent and listened closely to their stories of toil and silence, showing the same attentiveness she gave to sheikhs and ruins. Her time with Muhammad, she wrote, was a baptism of the desert. 20 days from Hayil, she entered the Nejd. Traveling with a Shamar noble family, she passed sheep herds and thorny terrain. She wrote to Doughty Wiley, "I wish you were here." News came of bandit Sheikh Saya. Gertrude rode to him first. He was polite, then robbed her, seizing binoculars and a pistol. Furious, she cursed him in her diary. May God deprive him of the other eye. As she neared Hayil, she learned Ibn Rashid had gone raiding, leaving a tense city under minor regents. Entering the Nefud, she found only sand, wind, and despair. It was a waste of time, she wrote. On February 24th, 1914, she finally reached Hayil. The Rashid court was weakened and suspicious. The emir, a boy, ruled after dynastic purges. Gertrude camped outside and sent gifts ahead. The next day, in white linen, escorted by guards, she entered the city, completing one of the boldest solo journeys ever made by a woman in Arabia. Welcomed into the Rashid Palace in Hayil in February 1914, Gertrude Bell was treated with courtesy, but soon realized she was effectively a prisoner. She met Turkiya, a courtesan and palace informant, whose reaction to Bell's interest in Ibn Saud made clear she was being watched. Behind the gilded harem walls, she heard whispers of violence, eunuchs murdered, bodies hidden in wells, and a power structure dominated by Fatima, the emir's grandmother, and regent Ibrahim. When Ibrahim finally granted an audience, he offered polite conversation and gifts, but soon afterward, Bell was informed that the ulama had forbidden her departure. Without an official declaration, she found herself under house arrest. Her finances frozen, her travel blocked. Days of tense silence followed until she was summoned to a secret, ritualized audience. Her gifts were returned, an unmistakable sign of rejection. Trapped and helpless, she endured rising anxiety as rumors of war and revenge circled the harem. Summoned to the women's quarters, she encountered captives traumatized by abduction and murder, their glittering surroundings a thin veil over suffering. On the 9th night, worn down, she dropped all diplomatic pretense. Confronting Ibrahim, she demanded her freedom, her camels, and her money, asserting herself with tribal authority. The result was immediate. Her golden animals were returned. On March 7, 1914, she departed Hayil in full daylight, photographing the palace and markets. She drank tea with Turkiya one last time and wrote prophetically to Doughty Wiley. The Rashids are moving towards their close. Though she failed to meet Ibn Saud, she saw him now as Arabia's future. The return to Baghdad was grueling. On March 8th, she began the long ride back, emotionally and physically battered. In Karbala, she found brief joy in a casual chat with a cheerful man planning to study in England. Back in Baghdad, her expedition was labeled a failure. She hadn't reached Ibn Saud or mapped Nejd, but Bell knew it had changed her. To Doughty Wiley, she wrote, "The end of an adventure always leaves one with a feeling of disillusion, dust and ashes in one's hand." In April 1914, as Doughty Wiley left for Ethiopia, Gertrude departed Baghdad for Damascus. She carried with her the first-hand intelligence of Ibn Rashid's decline and Ibn Saud's rise. With only 3 men and minimal supplies, she crossed the Syrian desert. The Bedouin welcomed her into oral tradition. Here we came with her, here she camped. At a massive Anazay encampment, she met paramount Sheikh Fahad Bey ibn Haddal. Scarred by decades of conflict, the sheikh questioned her purpose. Her honest reply, "The English do not like to sit at home," earned his trust. He welcomed her into his harem and permitted photographs, rare privileges for a foreigner. When a storm struck as she documented ruins, she returned soaked but continued recording tribal politics, women's lives, and architectural remnants. Fahad honored her with the finest meal of her travels and long talks on Ottoman British politics. Her intelligence impressed him. He would later side with Britain during the war. She arrived in Damascus on May 1st, 1914, too fatigued to rejoice. There she learned that Ibrahim of Hayil had been assassinated, confirming her prediction that the Rashid dynasty was crumbling. In Constantinople, she briefed Sir Louis Mallet, the British ambassador. Her intelligence on Ottoman weakness and German expansion via the Berlin to Baghdad railway was sent to Sir Edward Grey. Mallet called her mission a most remarkable exploit. Though celebrated at diplomatic salons, Gertrude felt emotionally detached. Polite chatter could not compare to her months among sheikhs and tribal warriors. On May 24th, she returned to England, where the Royal Geographical Society awarded her its gold medal, one of the few women ever honored. Weeks later, the world changed. Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, and Europe descended into war. With the Ottomans aligned with Germany, the Middle East became central to imperial strategy. Gertrude Bell's fieldwork and tribal expertise became crucial. In September 1914, she submitted a confidential report to British military intelligence in Cairo. She predicted the Ottoman collapse in Syria and Arabia and urged alliances with Arab leaders like Ibn Saud, the Sheikh of Kuwait, and Sayyid Talib of Basra. She noted even a German diplomat had admitted local preference for the British. By the end of 1914, Gertrude Bell had evolved from explorer to strategic insider. Her desert diplomacy, tribal trust, and fluency in Arabic rendered her indispensable. She was laying the foundation for Britain's wartime alliance with the Arabs, months before official policy caught up. But when war came, she was initially barred from returning to the East. In late 1914, she was posted to Boulogne with the Red Cross. She managed a bureau for missing soldiers, writing condolence letters and tracking the wounded. The work was grueling and left her hollow. She longed for Richard Doughty Wiley, now far away. His letters became her lifeline, offering reverent devotion, describing their bond as a marriage of minds. Gertrude responded with aching tenderness, promising him, "This year of mine and all the years that shall come after it." Their letter skirted the edge between friendship and forbidden love. In February 1915, Richard returned from Ethiopia. They met in London. An embrace, a kiss, and then at the threshold of intimacy, Gertrude froze. She confessed afterward, "Only you can free me from it." She asked him to claim her openly, or at least take the hour of love she was ready to give. But Doughty Wiley could not. Bound by duty and marriage, he replied with quiet heartbreak. "We never shall," he wrote, "but there is so much. All that there is, we will take." She loved him, but he remained out of reach. In April 1915, he was deployed to Gallipoli. In May, Gertrude received the news. Richard had been shot in the head leading troops ashore. She collapsed in grief. At Raunton, she spiraled, haunted by dreams, overcome with spiritual despair. His death shattered her. By late 1915, the British campaign in Mesopotamia was faltering. David Hogarth, now running intelligence in Cairo, insisted Bell be deployed. On November 19th, she sailed aboard the SS Arabia, arriving in Cairo on November 25th. There, she reunited with Hogarth and T.E. Lawrence. Gertrude Bell was now part of the Arab Bureau, an elite intelligence circle including Storrs, Woolley, Deeds, and Lawrence. Her tribal insights, linguistic fluency, and emotional resilience made her an irreplaceable force in shaping Britain's future in the Middle East. Billeted at the Continental Hotel in late 1915, Gertrude found new purpose within Cairo's colonial wartime energy. At the Savoy Hotel's makeshift Arab Bureau office, she rapidly organized and expanded Britain's tribal intelligence archives. While T.E. Lawrence focused on topography and troop movements, Gertrude became the Bureau's expert on tribal alliances, religious divisions, and Arab political sentiment. Still grieving Richard, she channeled her sorrow into influence. Her 1914 memo predicting Ottoman collapse now gained credibility, and she was quickly rising from explorer to policy shaper. Cairo's elite intelligence circle began to rely on her singular fusion of field experience, cultural fluency, and emotional insight. She was no longer merely an observer. She was building the policy architecture of Britain's Arab strategy. By early 1916, Gertrude had become the foremost authority on tribal dynamics across Iraq, the Gulf, and Nejd. Unlike Lawrence, whose focus was the Hejaz, Gertrude's field knowledge covered underexplored zones. She meticulously assembled a tribal catalog, mapping political loyalties, trade routes, and water access points with precision. Her interviews with Arab nationalists, Aziz al-Masri, Sayyid Talib, Nuri Said, and Jafar al-Askari, fed directly into intelligence briefings. She attended elite dinners and advised High Commissioner Sir Henry McMahon on the delicate negotiations with Sharif Hussein, passionately advocating for stronger support for Ibn Saud. Behind her back, however, Britain's Mark Sykes secretly negotiated with France's François-Georges Picot, conceding Syria and parts of Mesopotamia to French control. Bell vehemently opposed this clandestine deal. She astutely foresaw that the Sykes-Picot agreement would sabotage Arab trust and undermine the very revolt Britain was courting. It was, in her eyes, a strategic betrayal destined to sow long-term instability. While Bell's standing grew in Cairo, political control of Mesopotamia remained with the British India Office. Viceroy Harding opposed the Arab Revolt, fearing unrest among Indian Muslims. To bridge the rift between Delhi and Cairo, Bell was quietly dispatched to India in early 1916. Drawing on her relationship with Harding, she eloquently advocated for the strategic value of Arab alliances and intelligence coordination. Her success led to contributions for the upcoming Gazetteer of Arabia, and she left India feeling she had pulled things straight a little. Sailing through the shimmering waters of the Persian Gulf in March 1916, Bell felt both strategic urgency and emotional return. Iraq, where her past and purpose converged, awaited her arrival. Welcomed warmly by Lady Cox and reunited with Campbell Thompson, she was nonetheless treated as an outsider, denied official rank, pay, or authority. Despite these restrictions, she resumed compiling the Gazetteer, shared frontline intelligence, and privately criticized Colonel Ramsay's ineptitude. With the return of Sir Percy Cox, she cautiously won an ally. Though wary of Arabist plans and skeptical of women in policy, Cox recognized her immense value. She was soon entrusted with direct informant reports, and at a key luncheon with British generals, she made a compelling case for Arab alliances and her indispensable role. Her unmatched regional ties and tribal intelligence began to outweigh institutional sexism. Following the luncheon, Bell received a modest office, a symbolic recognition of her role, yet isolation persisted. Though trusted by figures like Colonel Beach and Reader Bullard, most British officers excluded her. She bonded with American missionary John Van Ness, who affectionately nicknamed her el-Mu'minin, but faced criticism from his wife for her dismissive view of Islam and Arab women. Despite cultural blind spots, Bell continued to shape policy, corresponding directly with Lord Cromer, Asquith, and Lawrence. In March 1916, with the Arab Bureau formally established under Hogarth, Bell was summoned to Cairo. T.E. Lawrence arrived in Basra with a secret £1 million bribe for Ottoman troops at Kut, a plan Cox rejected. Gertrude and Lawrence reconnected intellectually, but both grew disillusioned with the quality of Arab leadership and British expectations. She soon traveled to Zubair and gathered critical intelligence. She proposed peace talks between Ibn Saud and Ibn Rashid, but warned against arming either side. Gertrude's emotional and strategic limits were tested as the Siege of Kut worsened. When 13,000 British and Indian troops surrendered, her worst fears were realized. Though Cairo called her back, she refused to leave Iraq. Her connection to its land and people ran too deep. By mid-1916, she was writing for the Arab Bulletin, advising Cox, and conducting sensitive diplomacy with Ibn Rashid. She also cautioned British officials not to impose Western models on Iraq's tribal society. Despite her expertise, she faced hostility from men like A.T. Wilson, Colonel Leachman, and Hubert Young. Hogarth undermined her further by publishing private letters without her consent. Furious, she demanded formal status and won. She was appointed liaison officer and political correspondent to Cairo, granted a 300 rupee salary, and added to Cox's political staff, becoming the only woman with a political title in the British military. Now Major Miss Bell, she stood alone at the axis of war, empire, and tribal diplomacy. On June 5, 1916, Sharif Hussein launched the Arab Revolt, seizing Mecca and Medina. Gertrude celebrated it as a moral blow to the Ottomans and a vindication of her long-held visions, though the Viceroy of India opposed it, fearing its influence on India. Despite illness and marginalization, Gertrude's influence expanded. Her intelligence work continued, advising on tribal taxation tricks and strengthening links with leaders like Ibn Rashid and Percy Cox. But resentment brewed among the male elite. That summer, under extreme stress, she fell gravely ill with jaundice and was bedridden for weeks. Despite hair loss and fatigue, she resumed intelligence work by October. As 1916 drew to a close, Gertrude's tribal diplomacy continued despite her growing loneliness. In November, Ibn Saud visited Basra after signing a treaty with Britain. Though excluded from official talks, Bell engaged him in fluent Arabic and was struck by his charisma and shrewdness. Britain, she felt, underestimated his future. In letters to her father, she expressed emotional fatigue, though a river outing with St. John Philby offered a brief reprieve. With British forces capturing Baghdad in March 1917, Gertrude joined Sir Percy Cox's staff as Oriental Secretary, her highest post yet. Though initially opposed by General Maude, she was endorsed by Cox and General McMahon. Stationed next to Cox's office, she became the liaison between the British and Iraq's Arab population. She managed claims, advised on sectarian politics, and consulted religious leaders like the Naqib, swiftly earning trust for her tact and cultural fluency. Establishing a home along the Tigris, Bell created a base of operations complete with a lush garden and attentive staff. She regularly met Sunni and Shiite leaders, mediated disputes, and laid the groundwork for future Arab self-rule under British oversight. Her diplomatic breakthrough came when Fahad Bey, after months of silence, read her letter to his men, calling her mighty and valiant, a major political win that solidified her tribal authority. Gertrude's vision was undercut by the revelation of the secret 1916 Sykes-Picot agreement. Neither she nor Cox had been informed. The plan to divide Arab lands between France and Britain contradicted Britain's wartime promises to Arab leaders. She felt betrayed. Her project of trust-based partnership with Arabs was now built on broken promises, threatening Britain's credibility. Ronald Storrs arrived in Baghdad to ease tensions between Baghdad and Mesopotamia. At a key dinner with Cox and Gertrude, he introduced Prince Faisal as a potential leader, and Gertrude immediately recognized his promise. She impressed Storrs the next morning with a detailed political briefing and Baghdad tour. Energized by Storrs' praise and Philby's appointment as deputy, she reasserted her influence, transforming her home into an intellectual salon for British and Arab elites. Though awarded the CBE in October 1917, Gertrude avoided publicity and urged her family to do the same. She strongly opposed the Balfour Declaration, predicting it would ignite Arab-Jewish conflict, accurately forecasting tensions that would endure for generations. In early 1918, Gertrude traveled to Karbala and Najaf to assess anti-British unrest, becoming the first European woman received by Karbala's top cleric. In Najaf, Ottoman influence lingered, and British mismanagement had poisoned morale. A rebellion and assassination in Najaf changed Gertrude's view of Arnold Wilson. Initially wary of him, she came to respect his decisiveness and intelligence. She collaborated with him on planning a Persian mission to stabilize regional borders. Despite missing Cox's moral compass, she adapted to Wilson's pragmatism. A July 1918 trip to Persia briefly revived Gertrude's spirits, but when Cox was reassigned there, she mourned the loss of her trusted ally. Returning to Baghdad, she soon contracted malaria. A recovery cruise with General MacMahon marked the war's end, and for a fleeting moment, she allowed herself peace. But she knew Iraq's future held stormier challenges. After the Anglo-French declaration promising Arab self-rule, Baghdad buzzed with political intrigue. Gertrude documented varied reactions. Sunnis favored monarchy, Jews requested British protection, Shiites remained cautious, and former Ottoman loyalists fueled unrest. She began hosting teas for Muslim and Jewish women who arrived veiled and left unveiled, granting her insight to female lives across sectarian lines and deepening her investment in women's rights, leading her to advocate for Muslim girls' inclusion in the future national education system. She began work on defining Iraq's borders, ensuring Basra, Baghdad, and Mosul were included. Though she supported eventual Arab rule, Bell believed Iraq needed a period of British mentorship. She imagined a British High Commissioner supported by Arab ministers, a colonial protectorate with Arab agency. To her, it was a maternal stewardship rather than pure domination. With London's support for Iraq faltering, Bell was sent to England to advocate for continued British presence. Burdened with intelligence reports, maps, and her self-determination in Mesopotamia memorandum, she warned that vague Allied promises had sparked dangerous illusions among Iraqis. Before reaching England, she was rerouted to the Paris Peace Conference, where she arrived determined to secure Iraq for Britain. There, she confronted imperial politics at its coldest as Britain pursued Mesopotamian oil, France demanded Syria under Sykes-Picot, and America preached self-determination. Faisal's bid to be recognized as king of Syria was a political test. His regal poise and multilingual diplomacy impressed the Council of Four, and Gertrude, captivated by his potential, met with him at the Hotel Majestic and quickly advised compromise with France. She embedded herself in the Near Eastern policy bloc, working alongside T.E. Lawrence, Hogarth, and Wilson, becoming an important counselor to the men. Gertrude, Lawrence, and her father lobbied the U.S. to take the Syrian mandate, hoping to sideline France. However, the resulting King Crane Commission came too late, and France would claim Syria, leaving Britain to entrench itself in Iraq and Gertrude to return to a Middle East where promises were broken, alliances strained, and governance still unwritten. In Paris, Gertrude wielded unique authority. Fluent in the political and tribal structures of Mesopotamia, she argued forcefully that no one else at the conference possessed her first-hand knowledge. Moving between salons, embassies, and strategy sessions, she pressed for Arab self-governance under British oversight. A.T. Wilson, though skeptical of her politics, admitted she was the only official truly versed in the complexities of Iraq, Nejd, and Persia. Though she and Wilson respected each other's expertise, they diverged sharply. Wilson favored direct British rule, while Gertrude, now firmly admiring Prince Faisal and allied with T.E. Lawrence, championed a Hashemite monarchy. Though the Paris Conference secured oil and finalized mandates, it failed to address Arab aspirations. After spending a restorative month in Belgium with her father, she returned to London before embarking on a critical mission: a wide-ranging tour of the Arab world to assess attitudes toward nationalism, Zionism, and foreign influence. In Cairo, she witnessed unrest and met General Clayton, who warned that Egypt's turmoil could spread if Arabs were denied self-rule. Gertrude, once a staunch imperialist, now fully supported Arab-led ministries with British guidance. Tasked with identifying leadership candidates for Iraq, she dismissed Sayyid Talib Pasha as dangerous and ambitious, and endorsed Arab Revolt veterans like Jafar al-Askari and Nuri Said. After emotionally reuniting with her former aide Fatu in Aleppo, Bell returned to a changed Baghdad. British wives had flooded the city, creating a social class she found shallow. She preferred the company of Iraqis and was honored at an elite dinner where 50 Arab men rose to greet her. Her political stature was unmatched. She was no longer just an expert, but a respected cultural and diplomatic force. Back in her villa, Bell submitted a landmark report to the Foreign Office, advocating Arab self-rule under a Hashemite monarchy and warning against dismantling Faisal's Syrian government. She called for partnership, not military rule, acknowledging tribal divisions but arguing Britain's role should be supportive, not authoritarian. Wilson was enraged. To him, oil, trade, and imperial control mattered most. Their former alliance shattered. By 1920, Gertrude was revered by Iraqis, but increasingly isolated among British officials. The sudden death of her landlord, Musa Pachachi, and mounting unrest on the Euphrates deepened her anxiety. A violent uprising in Deir ez-Zor confirmed her fears. Wilson mocked her publicly and sabotaged her work privately. She sought refuge in travel and submitted a bold new memorandum, including a draft Iraqi constitution. Wilson grew hostile. He read and annotated her private correspondence and tried to have her dismissed. Bell's grief over her uncle's death and her emotional exhaustion became acute. Meanwhile, instability spread. Kurdish aggression, Turkish Bolshevism, Egyptian revolt, and Syria's economic collapse all signaled imperial overreach. Bell warned that failure to adapt would spark a wave of revolutions, but few listened. By February, she was increasingly marginalized, but she remained defiant, gathering intelligence from tribal leaders and maintaining that Iraq's survival depended on Sunni Shiite balance and fair governance. But all hell would soon break loose. By March 1920, Shiite clerics in Karbala and Najaf aligned with tribal leaders in Mosul and Deir ez-Zor to coordinate an uprising, and the Damascus Congress declared Faisal king of Syria and his brother Abdullah king of Iraq, catching the British off guard. Britain would eventually secure mandates for Iraq and Palestine, while France took Syria and Lebanon. France relinquished claims to Mosul in exchange for Iraqi oil shares. Iraqis were outraged by the mandate's vague promises, seeing them as colonial betrayal. Britain and France, meanwhile, signed a secret oil agreement involving Khalas de Gulbenkian, fueling U.S. resentment and initiating long-term geopolitical competition. Oil, not just politics, became the cornerstone of British strategy in Iraq. With Wilson ridiculing her and support from Whitehall waning, Gertrude turned to Iraqi elites, creating her own diplomatic salon for informal political discussion. The return of her aide Fatu brought emotional comfort, but this comfort would not last long. A British patrol's killing of a blind man near a mosque sparked citywide unrest. The Shamar tribe attacked Tel Afar, prompting brutal British retaliation. The 1920 Iraqi Revolt erupted in earnest, uniting Sunni and Shiite forces. By mid-June, rural Iraq was in full revolt. Gertrude's prior warnings had been ignored, and worse, Now she was being scapegoated for underestimating unrest. She privately despaired at British incompetence and the widening revolt. Faisal's government in Syria fell to the French, derailing Arab unity, and Gertrude feared further unrest if he fled to Iraq. Meanwhile, her father's financial collapse forced her to cut her allowance and offer her name for loans. The assassination of Colonel Leachman by Shamar tribesmen catalyzed deeper rebellion. Around this time, Sayyid Talib re-emerged as a political force, and though she was wary of his ruthlessness, Gertrude advised transparency in dealings with him and resolved to contain rather than confront him. The revolt was suppressed at immense cost, £50 million and over 10,000 Iraqi deaths. London now recognized the need for an Arab-led government. At the very least, Gertrude outlasted Wilson, who was soon removed from his position, with Sir Percy Cox soon returning as High Commissioner. With Cox's return, she regained political authority and orchestrated diplomatic recoveries. Gertrude helped form the first cabinet, supporting the Naqib as prime minister and persuading Jafar Pasha al-Askari to become Minister of Defense. She mediated a crisis with Jewish leader Sassoon Effendi, securing cabinet stability. Gertrude's 147-page white paper on British administration in Iraq was published in January 1921. Praised for its insight, it was marred by gendered media coverage and Wilson receiving partial credit. Days later, Churchill announced Britain would defund Mesopotamia, shocking Bell and sparking outrage. Summoned to Cairo, Gertrude joined Cox, Lawrence, and other key figures to chart Britain's Middle East future. In the bustling city, Bell reunited with T.E. Lawrence and aligned with Cox to promote Faisal as the ideal candidate for Iraq's throne. Churchill endorsed the plan, seeking stability and cost-saving measures. The committee voted unanimously in favor of Faisal. Gertrude and Lawrence devised a symbolic strategy, planning to make Faisal's journey appear as a groundswell of public support rather than a British installation. The council settled on Faisal for Iraq, Abdullah for Transjordan, and Hussein for Mecca. Palestine remained under British management, still aligned with the Balfour Declaration. The conference ended with optimism and humor, as Churchill fell off his camel just before a group photo was taken. Back in Baghdad, Gertrude orchestrated Faisal's journey with meticulous care. Attempting to maintain the illusion of popular support, she helped stage a nationwide welcome, coordinating logistics with symbols and propaganda. During Gertrude and Cox's absence, Talib spread anti-Faisal slogans and positioned himself for power. Gertrude exposed his intentions to Cox, framing them as incitement to jihad. Talib was arrested during a staged car breakdown and deported to Ceylon. Though this solidified Faisal's path, it fractured Gertrude's alliance with Philby, who had supported Talib. Gertrude attempted to use the press to legitimize Faisal, but Philby blocked her efforts. Their friendship broke down completely, marked by tense meetings and social coldness. Despite regret, Bell recognized Philby's removal as necessary. Faisal arrived in Basra on June 23rd, greeted with muted enthusiasm due to Philby's sabotage. He entered Baghdad on June 29th amid carefully staged celebrations. Faisal leaned heavily on Gertrude, who advised him on Iraq's tribal makeup, administrative structures, and court protocol. She secured the support of key Sunni cleric, the Naqib, orchestrating a crucial ceremonial embrace on July 7th that shifted elite sentiment in Faisal's favor. Gertrude arranged a landmark reception with Baghdad's Jewish community on July 18th. Faisal publicly kissed the Torah and spoke on religious unity. Later, at a majlis in Fallujah, he won over tribal leaders like Fahad Bey. Gertrude's behind-the-scenes diplomacy was central to these victories. Nuri Said emerged as a skilled strategist, surpassing the well-meaning Jafar Pasha. Saudi interference ironically strengthened support for Faisal. By August 14th, a choreographed referendum delivered a 96% approval rate for his kingship. At the Sarai in Baghdad, Faisal was crowned King of Iraq in a khaki uniform. Bell stood in the crowd, radiant with pride, witnessing the fulfillment of her years-long vision of an Arab monarchy supported, but not controlled, by Britain. Following the coronation, Gertrude shaped court functions, ministries, and protocol. She advised Faisal daily, even creating new ministries and securing representation for minorities. Her hand was discreet but decisive. Gertrude brokered appointments across political factions, Naqib as prime minister, Jafar as defense minister, Sassoon Effendi as finance minister. She resolved crises, like Sassoon's objection to Talib, by leveraging her credibility and persuasive skill. In private, Gertrude showed Faisal a map of Syria under French rule. He vowed to reclaim it, but Bell urged patience. A strong Iraq, she argued, could be the beacon for future Arab unity from the Persian frontier to the Mediterranean. Gertrude's influence earned her nicknames like Mesopotamia's uncrowned queen. Newspapers mythologized her, but loneliness plagued her private life. She confided only in Cox and Kinahan Cornwallis and carried out many court duties alone. By late 1921, Gertrude had quelled Kurdish unrest in Mosul with diplomacy and air power threats. Simultaneously, Ibn Saud's southern expansion displaced tribes and complicated Iraqi unification. The Anglo-Iraqi Treaty provoked controversy. Faisal rejected a mandate, calling it humiliating, and Gertrude resented Britain's oil-driven policy. Imperial priorities were undermining the independence she had helped build. Though Gertrude remained emotionally invested in King Faisal, his growing alignment with nationalist demands exasperated her. On June 4, 1922, she confronted him over tea, accusing him of betraying their shared vision for Iraq. He placated her with affection, promising reform, but within days, he reversed course again. Bell and Kinahan Cornwallis were left in despair. The fragile situation worsened when the Arab cabinet rejected the Anglo-Iraqi Treaty, and 2 pro-treaty sheikhs were assassinated. Clerics incited revolt. Faisal renounced the treaty under pressure, and even Churchill's promise of League membership wasn't enough to pacify the fury. Gertrude's influence waned as events spiraled. On July 6, she engaged in a bitter 2-hour confrontation with Faisal, during which he admitted he'd secretly opposed the mandate. By mid-1922, the monarchy teetered. Gertrude, exhausted and disillusioned, warned Churchill that if the mandate wasn't dropped, hell will be let loose. Faisal alienated core allies, and Bell privately labeled him weak as water. Yet on her 54th birthday, she secured passage of Iraq's antiquities law and was named Provisional Director of Antiquities, one of her proudest achievements. In August, amid mounting unrest, Faisal fell ill. Sir Percy Cox temporarily resumed direct British control, banned radical groups, and jailed agitators. Bell supported the crackdown. Churchill compromised. Iraq would be nominated for League membership. On October 8, 1922, the long-stalled treaty was signed. Bell, Cornwallis, and Faisal shared a rare moment of peace during a breakfast at Fakhri Bey's estate. Professionally, Gertrude was thriving, managing court life, the Salam Library, the Red Cross, and antiquities. But when Ibn Saud refused to meet with a woman, she was excluded from the Ogier Conference. Cox redrew Iraq's borders based on her maps, granting Arabia control over 2/3 of Kuwait and creating resource-sharing zones, a decision that would sow future disputes. Though respected, Gertrude's political role diminished as Iraqi leaders asserted themselves. Cox's retirement in May 1923 devastated her. He had been her mentor and closest ally. His final warning to London was stark: losing Mosul would be disastrous. Gertrude, meanwhile, kept busy supervising digs at and Kish and ensuring artifacts remained in Iraq. Her affection for Cornwallis deepened, and she compared him emotionally to Dick Doughty Wiley, her long-lost love. Back in Baghdad, now under the colder leadership of Sir Henry Dobbs, Bell's political influence shrank further. Her duties turned ceremonial, advising on royal decor, managing social calendars, and organizing hunting trips. Though intimate with Cornwallis, their bond remained unspoken. She focused on building the Iraq Museum from scratch, navigating confusion and inexperience among the staff. Though no longer shaping policy, she had become Iraq's leading voice for cultural preservation. Amid a tense atmosphere of assassinations and nationalist unrest, Bell retreated with Cornwallis to shield him from stress. The treaty passed in June, barely in time. Their relationship deepened. They dined nightly, and Bell confided her admiration in letters to her sister. Despite their affection, his impending divorce remained unspoken. Her 56th birthday passed in quiet loneliness. Cornwallis and others left Baghdad, and a British newspaper reignited controversy over her role in Faisal's coronation. Emotionally depleted, Gertrude collapsed by late August. King Faisal invited her to Conakin to recover. Under the stars, they rode and talked openly. He confessed his longing for Damascus. Gertrude realized how deeply he depended on her emotionally. When his son, Prince Ghazi, arrived in Baghdad, Gertrude took on a surrogate maternal role, arranging tutors, clothes, and guidance. As Queen Hazima and her daughters arrived in Baghdad, Gertrude attempted to guide them in royal etiquette and education. But the women's silence and lack of engagement left her disillusioned. Simultaneously, she orchestrated a high-stakes banquet for the League of Nations Mosul Commission, her involvement ceremonial but crucial. When Mosul was officially awarded to Iraq in March, it was a major strategic win. Gertrude also contributed to securing Iraq's future by helping negotiate the 75-year Turkish petroleum concession. However, her frustration with Iraq's cabinet, whom she described as asinine, intensified, and clashes with High Commissioner Sir Henry Dobbs escalated, especially over threats posed by Ibn Saud's Wahhabi raiders along Iraq's southern border. Though she continued attending duck hunts and royal bridge games, Bell's political influence continued to erode. A return visit to Uqaydir, once her great archaeological triumph, left her emotionally bruised, feeling erased from the legacy she helped create. That summer, Bell traveled to England physically depleted and emotionally worn. At Rounton Grange, now in decline, she privately confessed her romantic feelings for Kinahan Cornwallis to her stepmother. But when Cornwallis declined her implied proposal, the heartbreak was immense. Her sister Molly offered comfort, and Bell later wrote that the fire had burned out. In Baghdad, she was welcomed warmly by tribal leaders, but politically sidelined. Dobbs ignored her, and Cornwallis remained distant. Her unreciprocated love for Cornwallis lingered, wounding and unresolved. Still grieving, Gertrude told Molly that without love, life was a half-life. Tensions with Dobbs reached a breaking point, and she was effectively dismissed from meaningful political input. In December, while visiting Faisal's estate, she fell ill with pleurisy. Cornwallis and nurses cared for her tenderly. Then came devastating news. Her brother Hugo had died of typhoid. Though the two had once differed ideologically, Bell now envied the spiritual peace Hugo had found through his family and faith. In June, two long-awaited victories offered fleeting consolation. The Treaty of Ankara officially awarded Mosul to Iraq, and the Baghdad Museum, her crowning achievement, opened to the public. With over 3,000 artifacts on display, the ceremony was a triumph. Faisal attended and crowds gathered. For Bell, it was a moment of personal vindication. Yet in private letters, she admitted that beyond the museum, life had ceased to bring joy. Loneliness and fatigue were now her constant companions. As summer temperatures soared, Gertrude's few remaining friends left Baghdad. She was left behind, physically fragile, politically irrelevant, and emotionally hollowed out. At a final diplomatic dinner, memories of her first love, Henry Cadogan, resurfaced, adding to her sorrow. On July 11th, 3 days before her 58th birthday, Gertrude had lunch with Henry Dobbs and later joined a river swim, but the currents left her drained. That evening, she walked through her garden, past the dogs, flowers, and memories that framed her world. She asked her maid to wake her at 6. That night, overwhelmed by grief, loneliness, and dwindling purpose, Gertrude Bell took an overdose of sleeping pills, went to bed, and never woke up again. On July 12th, she was buried with full military honors in Baghdad's British cemetery. Her coffin, carried by British officers and followed by Arab dignitaries, ministers, and tribal sheikhs, drew a rare moment of national unity. Her fruit vendor, Haji Naji, sent a sorrowful letter to her family. King George V issued condolences, calling her a figure of lasting benefit to Britain and the Middle East. Gertrude's will left £50,000 to the museum she had built. A plaque in the Baghdad Museum's main wing, now bearing her name, recognized her unmatched contributions to Iraq's cultural identity. On April 4, 1927, the Royal Geographical Society hosted a grand memorial. Sir Percy Cox, her father Hugh Bell, and veterans of the Arab Bureau paid tribute. One speaker declared, "If ever a man or woman left this world victorious, it was Gertrude Bell." In Iraq, her memory lived on. Elders in Baghdad revered her. Gertrude Bell was not merely a British official, she was seen as a symbol of loyalty, intellect, and transformation, an imperial figure who had won local trust. The Hashemite monarchy in Iraq, the very institution Gertrude had helped bring into being, would endure for another 32 years. Its reign would come to a swift and violent end during the Revolution of July 14, 1958, when members of the royal family, including King Faisal I's grandson, King Faisal II, were brutally massacred. Though critics later blamed its collapse on foreign interference and Faisal's outsider status, Bell had always insisted Iraq needed a strong, unifying monarch. Under Faisal's reign, key milestones were achieved. In 1927, oil was discovered in Kirkuk, launching Iraq into the petroleum age. And in 1932, Iraq became the first Arab state to gain full independence and join the League of Nations. Yet deep sectarian and ethnic divisions between Shiites, Sunnis, and Kurds remained unresolved. Faisal's death in 1933 came just as he reconciled with Ibn Saud, leaving Iraq vulnerable. Although the monarchy fell, Gertrude's influence remained. Her visionary work in diplomacy, archaeology, and state building had shaped modern Iraq. Her story, marked by daring, sacrifice, heartbreak, and intellectual brilliance, continues to inspire generations of scholars, feminists, and historians. She died without a crown, but her legacy remains unforgotten, a testament to a woman who defied the limitations placed upon her gender and embraced a life defined by courage, intellect, and unwavering conviction. Gertrude Bell ruled over the realm that captured her heart, the vast, wind-swept deserts of the Arab world. It was there, amidst the shifting sands and beneath the starlit sky, that she found her true home, a place where her spirit could roam free and her passion for knowledge and understanding could flourish. And even now, long after her passing, those who venture into the desert can still sense the presence of her indomitable spirit, echoing through the dunes and whispering in the wind. So, what did you think of the remarkable life of Gertrude Bell? Her bravery was unmatched among the women of her era, and her intellect rivaled the most accomplished men of her time. She climbed mountains, crossed deserts, built a nation, and left behind a legacy that's still shaping the Middle East today. Was this the first time you'd heard of her? I'll be honest. Before getting the recommendation to make this video, I had never actually heard of her. So thank you to Charlotte's World Wide Web for suggesting her story. Without your suggestion, I might never have discovered one of the most fascinating, complex, and underrated women of the 20th century. And a huge shout out to Jan Murray 3155 for correctly guessing the subject of today's video. Thank you for playing along and for being part of this community. You absolutely nailed it. And if there are any other incredible figures from history you'd like to see featured on this channel, please leave a comment below. I'm always looking for new ideas, and your suggestions help shape the future of this channel. I'll do my best to create a dedicated video about them as soon as possible. I'd love to know what part of Gertrude's story stood out to you most. Was it her courage, her loneliness, her politics, or maybe just the sheer audacity of how she lived? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So drop a comment down below and let's keep the conversation going. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into history's most extraordinary figures. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, keep seeking the stories that move your soul.